All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. We have a lot of leftover AMA questions, so we're going to go through a heap of them today. We'll talk NBA, talk NHL, college basketball, and we'll even talk some Australian rules football, which I'm looking forward to. And that will be the last question. So if anyone doesn't want to hear my thoughts on the Greater Western Sydney Giants, then you can just switch it off one question early. But why wouldn't you want to hear them? Okay, let's start off with at DGen Chow, Drew. For long-dated futures, one, max percentage of bankroll do you advise to lock up while still having enough liquidity in season? Two, do you always take the best line, or is it worth taking a discount on a book that offers cash out, i.e. is it worth paying a premium for that embedded out option?
Well, my personal strategy is I never really allocate more than about 10% of my bankroll overall to season-long outcomes because there's two fundamental reasons why. The time value of money is a real thing. And honestly, in my opinion, at least, based on liquidity that you can get on some of the season-long stuff, if you have a huge edge on a team, let's say let's say you are way off market to the good on some team in the NFL. You're going to have opportunities to bet into that team game by game for the first 4 weeks of the season in a way that it can exercise much higher return than sitting on a future for the duration of the season. That does two things for you. Number one, it gives you the opportunity to pick your spots. If you decide you don't like a matchup and you don't want to play it that day, you can pass. Number two, it helps you avoid kind of mid-season shenanigans with roster shuffling. It helps you avoid, injury questions that really shift the trajectory of a team over the balance of the season. So if we're specifically talking division, conference, Super Bowl futures, they're fun markets because, you can get huge prices and you can lock in a relatively small risk for a relatively high reward. But I tend to, kind of very, very lightly allocate towards wins totals, very lightly allocate towards, awards when you're betting into favorites. And keeping most of my powder dry for game by game betting as we go through the duration of the season. I would say that the cash out versus just shopping for price, I'm almost always going to default to price. The cash out aspect of a lot of futures betting is number one, making a bad bet in terms of what is fair value at that time. And if you are well bankrolled, and you should be aspiring to get there at some point if you're not already there, you're going to ultimately have better ways to exercise a hedge if you want to get off a position. And if you listen to our show for long enough, you'll know that if you play a long shot in an awards market, for instance, and you're sitting halfway through the season with the healthy favorite in pocket, like rather than cash out, you should be thinking of, well, what specifically could hurt Brock Purdy MVP chances at this point? And how do I need to attack the board in other ways rather than just cashing out and taking my money? So, I think it's always a matter of just constructing a realistic kind of expected probability of all of the outcomes happening. It's very soft to do that in awards markets. Certainly, it's very numerically sound to do that in the futures pools for conference, division, Super Bowl, things like that. But I tend to stick to 5 to 10% preseason what I'm allocating, and then what I will do though sometimes, and I'm curious your opinion on this too, Jay. I don't have like the same problems I had when I was a younger gambler, where if my bankroll swells, I'm inclined to bet bigger, right? Like that was very much me as a younger man, but not really kind of describes my my staking appetite these days. That said, if you are in that place where you are, you do well through the first half of the season and your bankroll has doubled, and all of a sudden you're like, well, I obviously know what I'm doing. I guess I should just be betting more on these games. it's not crazy at that point to just look at the futures market, allocate a little bit of that balance towards some prices that you think are off at that time. And by doing that, just kind of you're investing, so to speak, in what you think are plus EV positions that'll pay later, and kind of keeping the balance out of your hands where you could ultimately lose it back playing stupid things. So that's maybe a little bit of advice depending on what level you are as a bettor in your life. And I guess ultimately, I'm curious, Jay, your thoughts on number one, last time you ever exercised a cash out, and number two, what whether you think there is some merit to just specifically focusing on futures if you're going to do that, and not even bothering with game by game.
Yeah, so I think you bet a lot more game by game than I do. So naturally, more of my bankroll is going to be allocated to futures and awards and that type of thing, and that's just because we focus. We've overlapped with a lot of the focus of what we do and what we bet on, but you're betting more game by game than I am. As far as the cash out thing goes, I think it's interesting because there's a lot of factors at play. One, you always have to be wary that typically there is a reason that cash out is being offered, and that kind of goes for aspects across a lot of things where it is like you are making a new bet, and often it's like, if you're betting into a book's 5% hold, often on cash out, it's like you're betting into a book's 12% hold or something just obscene. But I will say where cash out is viable is where you think that the cash out value represents value over a current fair. And at that point, it is smart to use cash out. I think that the first thing you have to look at is like, all right, if you want out of the bet, are you just better off betting the other side? But I also don't think that calculus matters that much, because it's really just like, all right, here is the value that I am being offered versus here is what, I make fair price. So say you have $100 on Naz Reid at 100 to 1 to win sixth man of the year. And then you make the fair on that. Say you think that he's a 15% chance to win now, but the cash out value is representing 25% of the value, then you should cash that bet out. Like, I don't really care about other positions in the market or guaranteeing a profit. If the cash out value is above your fair, then you should just get out at that point. And the other thing too is in terms of like deciding where you're placing your bet with cash out, just be very mindful of what is that specific book's like cash out algorithm. Like, are they taking like a ridiculous, 10, 12% premium in terms of the value, or are they actually, you're getting almost a neutral value on the cash out, in which case it's a much more handy thing to have. Also, just the type of market that you're betting into. Are you betting into a market that you think is going to be stale a lot, in which case you're more likely to be able to have a cash out value that is option that is value, or is it something that gets updated frequently at this given book and you're not likely to have much of a value? So at that point, you're better off just taking the best price. And as a general rule, you do want to take best price, but there are some niche situations, I think, where the cash out option is very valuable.
Okay. Can I ask you a cash out specific question? Because I don't really have a ton of experience with this, mostly because.
And offer it.
Yeah, all right. Well, maybe there's some new weird stuff going on that they might be trying to do that. Anyway, is there an element in the legal betting space where if you are exercising cash outs that in any way, shape, or form helps account preservation? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, like if you're just whacking them consistently with absurd prices for huge payouts and getting those home, that can have consequences for continuing to bet at certain places. And we have a limited number of shops that will take big bets on these things. Have you ever kind of thought that through, or run across a situation where, like, you know what, it's a small enough delta between waiting it out and cashing it out, and if I cash out, maybe I'm perceived a little bit differently in the eyes of the book?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. There's a couple of things where, so if you are utilizing cash out and banking a profit, that's going to obviously impact like your client profile, net profit loss. And so there's that aspect. Sometimes you want to delay a payout as long as possible on an account for account longevity. I think the biggest thing though is that as a general rule, cash out is perceived as a recreational option taken.
Sure.
And for the most part, for everything that you said, most clients aren't using cash out. People who use cash out typically, It is not a positive EV play. It's just people scared, frankly, and wanting to bank something out of their bet, which is not obviously the sharpest play. So as a general rule, cash out will shift you more towards a recreational profile in a book system, but that's not uniform. But yeah, that would be my background on cash out. All right, kind of a linked question in a way from Nav at Spicy P99. Spicy P, by the way, he almost killed Kobe White
close
on Wednesday night, which gave me a heart attack. It looks like Kobe's okay. Any interesting key nuggets for bankroll management? Unit sizing for regular plays, -110, for example, versus longer term futures. When to size up, down, if not using a model which quantifies an exact edge.
Oof, man. Do you want to take this one on first? Because I have somewhat controversial opinion that I kind of want to say second.
Sure. Yeah, I think bankroll management just in general is going to be very specific to what you're betting and what your bankroll is. I guess I will say that with the type of stuff that I bet, like I often can't get down the amount that I want to get down. Whereas if I were betting into NFL lines and totals for a living, I would need to think about this a lot more. But there have been situations in the past where a few years ago, I had 100% of my bankroll on one play because I thought that the edge was so significant, where I was backing 15-1 on what I made -150 fair. And I talked to my wife about it. I was like, here's why we need to put everything in terms of at least the bankroll. And like for my life situation at the time, like, I had a decent job, had stability. If I lost my entire bankroll, it wasn't going to really affect my life that much. It was going to, I'd just start building it up again. But I just thought that this was, at the time, what I thought was a once in a lifetime opportunity. And if this bet hit, then everything was going to be different. And so I had 100% of my bankroll on this one play. And fortunately, it ended up winning. But I will say that when there is, I would say looking back at that, I think that was like mathematically, scientifically, whatever, I think that was the correct play to do that because of the edge of 15-1 on -150 fair. Now, if you're backing 15-1 on 12-1 fair, obviously you shouldn't be putting 100% of your bankroll on that. I think it's very difficult to give out broader, like all-encompassing, sweeping advice for how to manage your bankroll. I think it has to be specific. I will say that my biggest regrets looking back at some things is when something is just way, way, way off. Even when if the bet wins or loses, sometimes I regret that I didn't take more advantage of it. Like to me, my biggest regret from a process perspective out of NFL season was that I didn't have more on D'Amico Ryans to win Coach of the Year, because I was extremely confident that his fair was basically the Houston money line to beat Indianapolis, and multiplied by 2. I thought he's a 50% chance to win Coach of the Year if he won that game, and the market was saying that he was like a 15% chance or whatever, and I thought it was 50. So like it saved me money in the long run, but taking that approach going forward, that same approach would cost me value going forward. So that would be my advice. And obviously you've got to do it responsibly, and you have to know with great confidence that your fair is correct relative to market. And there are certain markets that I'm betting into where I am very confident in my fares. But yeah, that would be my advice, is that if a price is wrong, then you should be obviously allocating more of your bankroll to that than you otherwise would on smaller edges. But what do you think?
Okay. So I want to tackle the last part of this question first. When to size up and down if not using a model which quantifies an exact edge? The answer is you don't ever do that. Because even if it's just a mental model of what do I think the implied probabilities of these events are, you should be using in some underpinning of a math framework for coming up with how much I'm bet sizing. Okay. Now I'm not in trying, do not take this as I'm talking down. Do not take this as there's only one way to do this, and it's the math way. But I definitely think that if you're at a stage of you're at your kind of progression of a player. Like, if if you're taking this seriously, you should be treating this like, kind of like a higher education, right? You're going to have to learn some lessons. You're going to go through an arc. You know more as a senior than you know as a freshman. You know more as a grad student than you know as an undergrad, right? Like, you're going to continue to kind of progress through the space as you continue to bet. If you are taking this seriously, if you are learning lessons, and if you are trying to get to a place where you are not losing money, and then ultimately get a place where you are using this as an endeavor to, fund trips to wherever you want to go in the world, or buy a house, or do whatever, or become a professional. Like, you should be aspiring to get to the place where you are using a model to figure out what your mathematical edge is. And at that point, if your bankroll is small enough, like, you're going to optimize it by Kelly staking, period. Now, there are plenty of examples of players who ultimately become good bettors that cannot necessarily emotionally detach from the ups and downs of wins and losses, and just the streaky nature of betting. And for those people, using Kelly staking is not an option, frankly. Like, you do not want to get into a place where, you're using the right math equations, you have an edge, you quantified your edge correctly, and yet you go on a bad run of variance, and the next thing you know, you're bankrupt. And now you're just like, you're ready to quit. Like, there's an emotional and mental aspect to doing this in the long term, that you need to do a little bit of self-evaluation of what kind of player am I. There's plenty of players that I know who are very, very good at this, who are just flat staking, like, not gonna deviate. I definitely know that this week there's one play on the board that I know is the biggest edge of all, but I'm just going to flat stake because variance is what it is. And then if that's the one that I know is the greatest, and I up stake and that loses, then I'm going to go on tilt, and it's going to affect me next week, and then the week after, and then the week after. And so, I think number one, kind of do a little bit of self-evaluation. What kind of player am I? What kind of risk tolerance do I have? I think Jay's story about, when you have an edge that is as big as, his example was, and your risk tolerance is, I can put, an enormous amount of my, percentage of my bankroll towards this endeavor. Like, if you're that type of player, like, all the power to you. You are going to get to the end. You're going to graduate faster. But I think in a lot of ways, you should almost certainly be flat staking, win or lose, flat staking as you start this endeavor, until you kind of have a good ground hold on whatever model you're using, what the edge is. And then from that point, I would Kelly stake until you get to the point where you're hitting your head on limits. And at that point, you're back to flat staking.
Yeah, no, it's I think that all makes sense. And I think that it touches on the idea as well that, like, a lot of your staking, it needs to be correlated to how confident you are in your fare. And this might sound a bit weird, so I'll give an example. Even within the same sport, even within the same kind of market ecosystem. So with the NBA, most improved player and sixth man of the year. With sixth man of the year, and this is probably more relevant a week ago because Monk, and I think now, is in a much stronger position, that he's much more entrenched in the top 8. But when Monk was like a game out of 9th, I didn't really have a great feel for how that market was going to go, because I don't have great certainty where if Nazarene is like a 2 seed with better efficiency and Malik Monk is on a 45 and 37 9 seed with better counting stats, I don't really know with certainty how voters are going to treat that situation, how they treat Monk being a 9 seed, but he's at 45 wins, which would typically get you like a 6 seed. Like, I don't really know with certainty how that situation unfolds, whereas I was very confident in most improved player that if Kobe White just maintains his stat line and Tyrese Maxey is in the play-in, I'm very confident that Kobe White wins the award, or at least wins the head-to-head matchup with Maxey. So I'm more comfortable, blasting into Kobe White at price than I am with Nazarene and Norm Powell, just relative to staking, because I just feel like I have a much better grasp of one market than the other. So yeah, that's what I would say there. Last point on the bankroll management thing. The biggest, well, I don't know if it's the biggest, but a piece of advice that I would give people is to just to not worry about banking wins out of a market where you have a strong position in. You should not be just giving up your equity because you want to guarantee and extract a profit. You don't need to win every single market type. Like, yeah, if it is a life-changing amount of money and you want to take a slight hit in terms of your expected value, in terms of taking a price at market that you think is slightly worse than your fair, that's fine. But outside of those situations, like, you need to view it as though every bet is placed on its merits. If you're in a really strong position in a market, like, you don't have equity to spend in the market necessarily. You're just making new bets and you have to decide whether each bet individually is a good bet to make. So sometimes you just have to go down with the ship, and you shouldn't be trying to get off the ship to go to like a bad island because you just want to get off the ship. Like, sometimes you just have to treat every bet on its merits.
Yeah. And as the last tiny comment, if you are at the place where you are struggling with bankroll management questions, and that is really an impediment to you progressing as a player, you need to probably look outside of betting a bit and just do a little bit of understanding of some of the mental biases that exist within humans, loss aversion. It's just in general, like the broad swath of mental biases that will impact your decision making, and explore that. Think about how it applies to betting, and I think you will kind of grow as a player.
Yep. And the final thing I'll say on this is, as I've spent more time in the industry and have been on both sides, being betting for a living and been taking bets for a living, I would say that the biggest thing that I have found is that the best bettors in the world and the worst bettors in the world both have extremely high risk tolerance. And in between, there is a lot of risk aversion. And obviously that's kind of a strange way to think about it, but one is very calculated high risk tolerance and the other is very uncalculated high risk tolerance. So that's how I would cap that. Anyway, let's move on to some sports specific questions. Question from John N. Are the Suns still a potential first round fade in the playoffs, Drew? As we look at the Western Conference odds, they are the fourth favorite now that the Timberwolves may be without Cat for the playoffs, or at least the first round of the playoffs. The Suns plus 900. They've been playing better lately, Phoenix. They had that impressive win against the Nuggets in Denver without Devin Booker, a game which, for all money, just like the Suns had nothing left by the end of that. I'm not sure how they won that. But they look like they've turned the corner a little bit, but they keep on having random losses. But what do you think of Phoenix?
Yeah, well, I'm expecting that you're going to get, I guess this is a very complicated question because, and it's not the reason that you think, because I don't know that it is necessarily matchup dependent. It's entirely, what happens to their market rating between now and the end of the season. And that's the complicated part, because the Suns still do have a hellaciously tough schedule. They play a lot of good teams in a lot of good spots. If you're listening to this now, you already know the outcome of some Suns Celtics games, the Suns Celtics game from Thursday. Just for transparency, I bet the Suns in that game. They got 6 points. I don't know how that got out to 6, but I'm holding 6 on Suns. I think fair is closer to 3.5. And I'm very prepared for the Celtics to continue dunking on me as I try to find the right time to fade them, but whatever. All that said, let's say the Suns, that now that they're healthy with Booker and Beal playing, enough minutes that Durant can kind of take a deep breath, their regular season performances should be relatively solid. And if you combine the fact that they're playing a bunch of good teams and that they're healthy and playing well, they're going to win games that convince the market in general that they ought to be upgraded. And I will tell you that this is starting from a point where they were already a little overrated. And so I think that there is a potential here for kind of a perfect storm of, we get to the finish line. The Suns have had a healthy stretch of basketball against really good opponents who are all kind of locked into decent position and not necessarily treating the games as seriously as the Suns are. And, the Suns could be perceived as like this amazing sleeping giant in the West, when it's at the end of the day, I still feel like these guys are fatally flawed in a best of 7 series. They have maybe one small advantage, which is if you get into the later stages of a series, when it becomes iso ball, later stages of the games in series, when it becomes iso ball in fourth quarter, they have the X factor. Kevin Durant can create a shot that is indefensible practically. And there's very few teams, Clippers be maybe the clear exception, that have enough defensive personnel and mutability to really kind of handle the offensive potential of the end of series, end of games that the Suns are going to bring. The problem, as they learned last year against the Nuggets, is you got to get to the end of the series and the end of the games and be competitive. And the Nuggets were able to kind of keep enough distance from them throughout the balance of those key games to get through 4-2 pretty comfortably, I thought. And if they get matched up against the Nuggets at any point in the series and at any point in these playoffs, then, you have anything remotely close to what we saw last year in terms of pricing, it's going to be impossible not to have a huge stake on the Nuggets, in my opinion. So I think ultimately we are set up well if the Suns can stay healthy and if they can do well in some of these games against high-profile opponents into the close, so that the market could take them into the playoffs as a truly, truly overrated team. I think if you look pretty closely at the minutes that they've played without Durant and Booker, it is really, 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 really poor basketball. And any of, like any game against a legit team, you're going to have to stagger Booker and Durant almost certainly. That's going to limit the offensive efficiency of, how much time they can spend on court together when they're the most dynamic. And I still haven't really totally wrapped my head around how good and how reliable Beal is going to be throughout this whole stretch. So for me, the answer is yes. And for me, the answer is actually that we have a little bit of a brewing perfect storm where this might be exactly the best possible set of circumstances.
Yeah, I think they're a very strange team because I think the depth has actually been a little bit better than anticipated, or at least I think Nurkic has been better than expected. I think Grayson Allen has a 69% true shooting percentage. It's insane. Players like him are incredibly valuable on offense in this type of team structure where you have the three ball handling stars. But the issue is even though the depth has been slightly above par or at least par, I think the issue is that like Durant and Beal particularly, it just don't seem as good as they've been in the past. Like Durant turns 36 this year, and I don't think that he is the same defensive player. I don't think he's really the same offensive player either. And Beal just looks so slow and sluggish. Like he just doesn't look all the way right, which makes sense because he's missed half the season. And I think also just instructive that this team, I don't think they really have any ceiling on defense. They just don't have the size. They don't have the versatility. And then on offense, and I understand in the game against Denver that, Booker was out and the team just looked gassed and so much was going to Durant. But you just look at like the quality of shots that Nikola Jokic guarantees you every single possession, particularly in the clutch. And it's so ridiculous. Like DeRozan is now like minus 190 to win clutch player of the year, and Stephen Curry is the second favorite. Like Nikola Jokic is the best clutch player in the NBA, and he's not going to win the award, but he probably should. But what the Suns were doing at the end of that game, it's just like, all right, Kevin, dribble, ball screen, but don't worry about going around if you don't want to, and then just pull up from 20 feet with a hand in your face. Like it's not great. I understand that Durant is about as good a player in history as you can get to take those kind of shots, but it's a massive load on him, and Booker helps, but I just don't really see the ceiling for this team. I wouldn't be shocked if the draw broke in a way that they could probably beat any team in the West outside of Denver. They're not drawing dead against Oklahoma City or the Clippers, I don't think. But I do think they are probably worse than those teams, and they would be dogs against them. And I think they would have massive issues with Denver.
Yeah, they got to close with Durant as center.
Yeah, which isn't great.
No, and I mean honestly, like who else you got? You got Booker and Beal out there. Hopefully Beal, Grayson Allen, and then Okogie or Royce O'Neal is your fifth out there. You either go Royce and you're hoping for better defense, or you go Kogi and you get a little bit, just somebody who maybe is a shooting threat. I don't even know. Okogie's offense is so bad. I honestly, they look fatally flawed in the close, which I think is a problem.
Yeah, I always thought there is a weird thing with that type of construction where if you have like multiple weak points on defense to pick at in the playoffs down the stretch, like it almost doesn't matter if you have two bad defenders because like Jamal Murray and Jokic are just going to pick on the worst guy in pick and roll. So if you have another bad guy who's only slightly better than Grayson Allen or whatever, it almost doesn't matter as much. But no, I think they're going to be in trouble, particularly if they have to see Denver. All right, question from Bud at Foster ST11. Thoughts on the changes in NBA totals throughout the season? Seems like they're 10 points lower on average now compared to last month. Tom Haberstroh wrote an article about this. I think this is now pretty widely it's been widely circulated that just the refs are just swallowing the whistle. Like all fouls are down, shooting fouls are down, off-ball fouls are down, just less is being called. Whether that's a directive, you figure that it probably has to be. But yeah, I think that is the reason for it, Drew.
Yes. It's the roughing. And let's get like a couple of things on the record here. There are no fixed outcomes. There's no scandals. There's nothing weird going on. Like, this is pretty par for the course. The NBA does a mid-season deep dive evaluation on the quality of reffing relative to and the quality of entertainment of the product, and they make tweaks and they send memos and they make points of emphasis to the reffing crews in order to try to improve the quality for us, the fans. And thank God they do it, because if you let certain things go down, if you let things run amok and it's just the game becomes a game that is unwatchable, then that hurts the bottom line for everyone, and it makes it less entertaining. So I am glad that they do this. I think it is very likely, if not certain, and I don't know if the deep dive that the media has done on this has declared this a certainty or if this is just an assumption, but pretty clearly they've taken a huge de-emphasis on fouling or de-emphasis on specifically touch fouls, from what I can tell. And for those reasons, the teams are playing a little bit better defense. They're getting a little bit more aggressive, and this is deja vu all over again. Because coming into the 2022 season, I believe it might have been 2021. I'm drawing a little bit of a blank here. They tried to take away the Harden 3-point foul, right? The play where he kicks his legs out, gets fouled, gets 3 free throws. And they were like, no more of that. And that had huge implications, because that meant that closing out on defense was all of a sudden back. Right? You weren't like threatening giving up 3 free throws, which was higher probability than giving up the 3, right? That was more impactful to negative, the negative sense for you defensively than allowing the 3 to be shot. And so you saw more aggressive defense, more chasing off the 3-point line, more aggressive closeouts, and it really, really impacted scoring. And it was notable. And there was a good month at the start of the season where you could have blind bet unders and you would have hit something like 65-70%. It was absurd. The market lags on these. The market's using previous data as an indicator for future lines. It's always anchored to what was our last opening line between this team and similar team, this team and their exact opponent, right? There's always anchoring influencing this stuff. And so if you can capitalize on those lags, then in my opinion, those are the most valuable observations and the most valuable angles that you will ever come across as a bettor.
Yep. No, I'm with you. It's once there was at the book I worked at, there was we had a client once who was just blasting into Korean baseball overs and just kept on winning, just like constantly. And it wasn't like it was a recreational client. There's no real I didn't think that there was an edge or something. And I think this was probably just blind luck, but turned out they were juicing the ball in Korea and just every over was sailing over. And so there's just random things. I remember I had a friend who was betting into like A-League, Australian soccer, like first half unders or something, for some reason that there was some sort of edge. But sometimes, if you can find those league-wide trends before the market adjusts, and the market took a while to adjust to these Korean baseball overs. So that type of stuff, there is definitely something to be found. All right, spring training is here. So for those looking to get ahead on the upcoming MLB season, grab your RotoWorld Baseball Draft Guide. It's loaded with comprehensive positional rankings, projections, and player profiles to ensure your draft is a success. Visit NBCsports.com/draft guide and use code baseball24 to get 10% off at checkout. All right, question from Yavans.ron. Need more puck talk. Are the Oilers still the best team? Can Matthews still win the Hart Trophy? I'll take the second part first. The Hart Trophy, Nathan McKinnon's -170, Connor McDavid +330, Matthews +650, Nikita Kucherov has been a massive drift out to +750. I think Matthews still can win the Hart Trophy, but he needs to get a real move on with his scoring. I think he's been goalless in like 6 of his past 8 games. he's not going to win unless he starts sniffing 70. And so now he is at a big deficit. I don't think there's a bet there. I think McKinnon is tier 1 by himself. McDavid is tier 2, probably by himself at this stage. And then Matthews and Kucherov are tier 3. I think the sneaky thing with the award is that McDavid still has 3 games in hand on McKinnon. I think they play each other a couple times upcoming, which could be important in the race. Though I just think that at this point, if McKinnon finishes within a few points of McDavid, I don't think he even has to beat him. I think the fact that he's going to have scored a lot more goals than McDavid, their stats are going to be comparable. And I think that it's not quite to the same level, but there is an MB 2023 thing of it's Nathan McKinnon's year, which I think it's kind of taken hold. And McDavid, it's just kind of tough for him to win if he's going to have a worse year than years past. And McKinnon, who has lost narrowly in the past, is having this type of season. So I think that the market is actually pretty fair on this one now. In terms of the Oilers, are they the best team? Yes, I think they are the best team in terms of team quality, but I would not have them the favorite to win the cup. And I think this is actually a miniature rort at the moment where the market is pricing too much off of team strength, or at least perceived team strength. I don't know why the Avs are plus 750 in the second favorite. They should not be one of the top 4 favorites. But it's pricing too much of team strength and not enough off of path through the playoffs. And so the key thing in the outright market in the NHL right now, in my opinion, is that of the 6 best teams in the NHL, only 2 of them are in the East. And 4, and you could argue even 5 of the top 7 are in the West, depending on your opinion of Winnipeg relative to the Rangers, Leafs, and Bruins. But I think that pretty clearly 4 of the top 6 are in the West. That would be Dallas, Edmonton, Colorado, and Vegas. And Vegas, this is like, talk about rort, miniature rort, NHL Stanley Cup market, massive rort, this stupid LTIR loophole in hockey where, because Vegas have guys they can put on long-term injury reserve, those guys come off the cap and they can just add in these new dudes, and then the injured guys can just come back for the playoffs. It's ridiculous, but because of that, Vegas were able to make massive additions at the deadline, and now they are kind of terrifying. As someone who doesn't have a cent on Vegas and who got mostly screwed by Vegas, at least in the West last year, very scared about the Knights, though. They're going to have to do it with every series on the road probably, and also they may not get Mark Stone back, which will hurt them. So I think the angle is that the Panthers and the Hurricanes are just so much better, I think, than every other team in the East. And the Stars, Avs, Knights, and Oilers are going to have to all go through each other, this battle royale bloodbath. So I think at current price, I think the Hurricanes are the best bet on the board at plus 800. And then I think the Panthers also, there's still some plus 650 about on them. So I would just go to war with the Panthers and the Hurricanes. And then trust that, in my opinion, the greater than 50% chance that one of them gets out of the East, and then they're your fighter in the Cup Finals against whoever is left standing out of the West. Who it's so difficult. The West is so loaded. I would have the Stars and the Oilers as the tier 1 in the West at the moment. But yeah, at price, I'd be taking the East teams.
Okay. Well, I'm going down with the oil tanker.
Yeah, it's a good tank to go down with. They have the best team, I think. It's just that every series is going to be pretty tough, whereas the Hurricanes are going to get like this round 1 series against like the Flyers or whatever, and they'll just be monster favorites. Whereas the Oilers might have to play the Knights in round 1, and the Stars might have to play the Avs in round 1. So bit of a mess in the West. I am cheering for the Winnipeg Jets to, I don't know if you're going to get this reference, but you know Stephen Bradbury, the Australian ice skater, who basically he was coming in 5th, going around the bend, and then the top 4 guys, they all collapsed into each other, and he just skates through, takes the gold medal. Stephen Bradbury,
short track, of course, hero, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of hoping that the Winnipeg Jets do that after the Stars, the Oilers, the Avs, and the Knights all kind of take out each other, and the Jets just kind of slide around the corner, which actually might be possible if they win the division and don't have to play Dallas or Colorado.
Yeah.
All right.
He got better of Apollo Ono, of course. I'm an Olympic historian. I know this.
Yeah, it was. It's actually he's like an Australian hero, which I don't really know if he should be because
this was Salt Lake City. It was supposed to be Apollo's time. And the Chinese or the Korean skater, or maybe both of them, were really they were playing fast and loose with the rules, and they mucked up Apollo, and they all went down. And Bradbury gets the gold.
It's the look on Bradbury's face as he rounds the corner.
He's like,
yeah, he's a gold medal lying on the ground, kind of like the free steal that Bam Adebayo picked up after Jokic dribbled the ball out in that game. All right, next question from at Jason Head 12. Whale Kappa, do you have a list of conference using different basketballs?
I do. In fact, it's team specific if you are curious. This is a funny story, and it has yet to be proven out at least anywhere close to as effective as it was last year. Little brief history: the official NCAA tournament balls for the grand 68 team tournament will be supplied by Wilson, and they are officially the Evo NXT balls. The Evo NXT balls were designed in a way that they are beautiful bright orange. Like, you cannot miss them. You look at the picture and you're like, what ball? Oh, that's the Wilson Evo NXT. It is a very standout visual appearance. And it also has one other characteristic, Jay. It is very grippy. It allows for especially smooth handle, and it is for the point guards, for the guys with the ball in their hands, they love this thing. If you're a recreational player, you go get one. You'll really enjoy dribbling this thing around. One problem: it's so grippy that it grips to the rim on the 3-point shots pretty effectively. And we know this because last year was the first year they used it in the tournament, and people looked at the 3-point made data from round one, and they noticed a very startling trend, which amounted to what the heck happened to the shooting. And effectively, the best I can glean is that this is a different ball than a lot of teams were using in the regular season. And because of that, they were really it was unfamiliar, first of all, feeling as you were releasing. And then the ball itself, some rims are soft. Some balls are especially conducive to high shooting or to good shooting percentages. And this was the opposite. It just was gripping to the rim. It was bouncing off. And you just saw an immediate and obvious impact on scoring. Now, the more familiarity you get with the ball, that starts to drop off, right? And so you would see this trend really kind of peak in first half of games, in early rounds, particularly with teams that were unfamiliar with the ball. This was noted at certain conferences elected to use this ball in their conference tournaments, and somebody very sharp who I'm friends with was like, sent me a note and was like, can you check this data out because something looks wrong? And it was like, why are these conference tournaments specifically having way low 3-point shooting percentages for these teams? And the answer was, well, those teams are using Nike Elite balls during the regular season, and then they switched to the NXT for their conference tournaments, and they could not make a shot. And so there was a macro angle in round one of the tournament where if you had two teams that were playing each other that were Nike teams during the regular season, and then they were using the Wilson NXT ball in the round one of the playoffs, they came in under in the first half at about a 75% clip. And this is, again, kind of goes back to the best stuff you ever come across, like just a macro thing that you just can't ever really capture by market. And so I was keen to see, number one, make a list of what balls teams were using this year. And then number two, see if there were any impacts to start out in conference tournament play, because the SEC, the Pac-12, the Big 12, and the Big 10 are all using the Wilson Evo Next in their conference tournaments. So far, the results have been mixed. There have been a couple games where there has been a clear and obvious impact, and then other games where there's been, it's just kind of normal shooting, normal scoring. There's been a couple of highlights which are hilarious, like guys going up for like obvious easy dunks and the ball literally gets stuck on the rim. It's just like, like just weird, like visually confirmatory. Yes, this is something different. This is something weird, but an equipment change, a rule change, these things can be extremely profitable if you can if you can ultimately identify something usable here. And while I don't have the answer key yet, because we need to see, who makes the tournament, who gets matched up with who, I would say that keep an eye on, market steam. How much is this being captured? Right? How different are these totals than, say, a neutral estimate like from Ken Palm or from Bart Torvik? And then specifically look at 3-point shooting data to confirm that there is still an issue. Because if we're talking about it, if it's being circulated on Twitter, the coaches probably know this, and they may have like their teams like practicing with these balls more regularly as the season comes into a close, and there's just maybe some more familiarity, so this goes away. But first half unders for select games in the conference tournament, in the NCAA tournament was gold last year, and I'm going to take a swing again this year. Hopefully it's not baked in.
Okay. Fascinating. I love it. Certainly something to track. All right. Last question before we get out of here. Question from Lachlan Hall at lhall98 on Twitter. Okay, I might be the only one interested, but if Jay wants to go down the AFL rabbit hole on the pod, I'll be interested to hear his thoughts on this AFL season. Sorry, this request is coming from a fellow Aussie. Thank you, Lachlan, for the question. So let's talk briefly about AFL. The GWS Giants, Drew, they're the favorite to win it all at plus 450. My beloved Collingwood Magpies, second favorite, reigning premiers, plus 500. The team they beat in the grand final, Brisbane, plus 500. And then Carlton, Sydney, and Melbourne follow. I would say macro, talking about the season, one, GWS, they ended last year as kind of the hottest team. They came from the bottom of the top 8 to surge into being 1 point away from winning the grand final. There's this young team. They have this coach, Adam Kingsley, who's probably like the Mark Daigneault of AFL coaches, the kind of next prodigy coach. And so just a lot was lining up for GWS. And then in round 1, they beat Collingwood handily. So that is why, they were like 4th favourites to the flag before the first round. And now they're the favourites because they knocked off Collingwood. I would put the brakes a little bit on GWS. No interest in them at current price. There's a couple of things. One, they still don't really have a forward line. And then 2, they beat Collingwood, but by the underlying stats, they really shouldn't have. They beat Collingwood by, I think, 32 points, but Collingwood had more inside 50s and had more scoring shots. And so by the expected scores, Collingwood actually should have won that game by 20 points. So would pump the brakes on GWS a bit. The 2 teams that I would be monitoring the closest in the outright market would be, one, Sydney, who had a really impressive win first up over Melbourne. And Sydney, they had this legend of the game, Lance Franklin, who retired, and they've remodeled their forward line without him, and they look a little bit more coherent. They also added this player, Brodie Grundy, who 3-4 years ago was just about the best player in the league and then kind of lost his way, but now he's on a new club, and he was basically the best player in the league in the first round. So if he is just back to being Brodie Grundy, then that is pretty massive for Sydney. So that to me, they're the biggest team to monitor. And then the other one would be Melbourne, who are plus 900. And Melbourne have had this offseason of just like total turmoil. Their star, their second best player, Clayton Oliver, had all this off-field stuff where people didn't know if he was actually even going to be on the team anymore. And so people are just very cold on Melbourne as a result. They still have a massive amount of talent. And I just always, in general, fade the idea of off-field stuff. Like in the AFL in 2005, 2006, the West Coast Eagles, their captain, their superstar player, was a drug addict, and it came out afterwards. And there was this huge culture at the club around recreational drugs with Ben Cousins and the guys, and they won the premiership in 2006, and they were one kick from winning it in 2005. Like, I think off-field stuff often just gets really overrated across all sports. But so I think that they still have a massive amount of talent, and again, just monitoring them each week to see if they kind of flip the switch. And then the last thing, Drew, before we get out of here, my Collingwood Magpies are actually a very interesting kind of statistical case or archetype of a team, because their past 2 seasons, I don't know what the exact record is, but in like under 2-goal games, which is like a field goal game, I guess, they've gone like 17-4 or something. Like, they just have this insane record in close games. And so the natural inclination is to be like, all right, well, this is lucky. They're not actually that good, and this is going to regress. But it never actually regresses, and it's happened for 2 years now. They won all of their finals last year by by single digits. They just seem to excel in close games. And I think there is a small element. Well, there is an element of luck. Perhaps it's not small, but I do think there is actually something about the way Collingwood play, where when they have a lead, they're incredibly disciplined at being able to just kill the game off. And when they don't have a lead and they need to score, they are the best team that I've ever seen at being able to extract the ball from tight spaces, get out into space, and then use the ball really well going forward. So I do think there is something about their actually playing style that just lends itself incredibly well to close games. So I don't think that they are just some paper tiger that's going to fall over. So I still think that they may have the best team, but they have a really hard draw, and at plus 500, probably not getting involved. But how much AFL have you watched in your life, Drew?
I traveled to Australia for the first time in 2012. It was this time of year, right when the season was getting started. Sure. And it was very easy to understand why it is a very fun sport to watch at the bar. Yeah. It is great entertainment. And I've like kept a little bit up with it since that trip, which is now going on, 13 years ago, 14 or 12 years ago, I guess. But I think I have an AFL originator. He's got me on 3 dogs this week. I think he's basically been playing only dogs so far this season. And looking for the St. Kilda Saints to stay within 12.5 to the Geelong Cats.
Yep.
Geelong Cats.
I like that.
And I got the Western Bulldogs to stay within 8.5 to the Melbourne Demons. And then the Sydney Swans to stay within 11.5 with the Collingwood Magpies. So hopefully a dog weekend in the AFL.
Yeah, no, I like the bet on Sydney. And it's funny, like if anyone's just bored and wants to find, and just wants to have a bet on an AFL game, the Australian book that takes the biggest bets and kind of is a market setter for AFL, is called TopSport. And I can tell you right now that US books get very stale with their AFL prices, so it's really not great for your account. So if you're just betting small, want to have an interest because you casually just want to watch an AFL game, just check what the price is on TopSport and then check what it is at your given book, and you'll probably have a small edge and a way to watch the game. But I will say,
it's a handicapped sport over there mostly, right? People aren't playing money lines; they're playing the point spread.
No, I think it's a bit more balanced than with than say the NFL or whatever, which kind of the discourse is around what the line is. I think in the AFL, in Australia, there's such a culture of parlays over there. We call them multis, just like multiing favorites.
Gotcha.
And we don't even call it a money line. We just call it the head-to-head.
The head-to-head, okay.
I will say, and I'm extremely, extremely biased, though I am, I think, fairly reasonably level-headed on most things, kind of Australia. But I do think Australian football is the best sport in the world. Just the combination of endurance, athleticism, skill, just the spectacle of it. Outdoor stadiums, 100,000 people. It is pretty cool. So
it's fast, it's engaging. It's like if football didn't have the very boring huddle commercial aspect to it. Honestly,
it's a continuous game. It's very. You have to be very strong, very fast, very skilled, and have a great leaping ability. So it just combines a lot of different athletic traits. And so, as much as we talk about Ronald Acuna Jr. and Royce O'Neal, AFL will always be the one for me.
Yeah,
all right.
That was a great breakdown. I'm doing a deep dive. I can confirm everything you said about Collingwood. Congratulations to last year's Clutch Player of the Year, Brody Miocic. Guy was he was Miocic, just incredible in the clutch last year for the Mariners.
We call him Checkers. Brody Miocic, Checkers. Yeah, no, he's very solid. Very much the Sean Livingston of the team. Just very reliable. Never misses from the mid-range. Does checkers. All right. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also, a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you next week.